Why is Gen Z returning back to church? There have been several statistics and studies that have come out in the last year, 2 years, 3 years that are pointing towards an increasing trend that is Gen Z buying more Bibles, returning to church, becoming more religious overall. And this is particularly interesting because this is the first time in a few generations where religion is starting to become more popular again. We've been seeing a decline in religious affiliation and spiritual people or faithful people the last couple of generations. This sort of began to occur around the baby boomer generation and has slowly declined until now. The pendulum is swinging back the other way. Gen Z, all the data is pointing towards Gen Z returning to church. So why is that happening? Well, we're going to get into that today and my thoughts on what's going on. All right, welcome back to the Discoveries in Faith podcast, everyone. This is your host, Jacob, as always. And today I want to talk about a trend that I've been reading about recently and something I've been aware of for a while now, and I've been wanting to make an episode on it. And it's so prevalent to what the mission of this podcast has been, and that's to speak to my peers, my fellow Gen Z, and just younger people in general. I feel like we never think we have as much power as we do in the younger generations. We always assume that everyone that's older than us, who's been in the job force, who's in politics, are the ones in charge. But really, we can shift the culture, and we kind of dictate where the culture goes in many ways. And a part of why I've wanted to start this is just discuss these concepts and just try to make people feel empowered that it's good to talk about these things, and you do have a voice, you have an opportunity to be excited about your faith, and this is an evangelization process, of course. So what we're going to do is I've compiled some statistics and some studies that are pointing towards what I'm talking about, and I'm going to discuss kind of my thoughts, of course, as to why I think this is happening. Why are we seeing this unprecedented turn back towards church in a modern era when a secular culture is telling us more and more how religion is this antiquated, old way of doing things? Why is it that's becoming more popular with the younger generations, especially Gen Z? Like Gen Z, I'm Gen Z. I'm an older Gen Z. I'm 26. So why is it that these people in their late teens and to late 20s, why are we seeing this turn back towards the church? And it's a very positive and uplifting turn. So we're going to talk about a few studies that I found. There are also some contradicting studies, but overall, I do like the data that I'm feel free to argue these things in the comments as well. Like, I'm obviously going to have a biased algorithm and things like that. I've gone past my Instagram and TikTok algorithm. That's not where all this is from, but I've tried to compile some studies. So the Barna Group survey is the big one that I've seen that is saying that the percentage of younger people saying they've made a personal commitment to Christ has risen significantly. So young Z, it's Gen Z and millennials were actually included in this study. But Gen Z seems to be the primary one that these studies have focused on. Is there's an increase from 54% in 2021 to 66% in 2025 with people that have said this. Now, that's not. I don't think 66% of my generation is religious. So I don't know where they're getting that information from. But then it goes on to say the data found that Gen Z churchgoers attend services on average 1.9 times per month. So obviously the people that go every week, I would say that's like your devout, serious Catholic or Christian is going, every weekend, every Sunday. And so they're going to obviously offset the people that just don't attend church at all. And then, so that's 1.9 times per month, and it's slightly above millennials, which are at 1.8 times per month. And then these are both actually higher than some of the older generations. And now the data has shown religious people that subscribe to a religion has been fairly constant throughout history until the baby boomer generation. That's where we begin to see a little bit of this decline. And so you have things like this is post World War II, Vietnam War era, things like that. Like that's when like sort of the culture as we know it in like Western culture begins to take shape. And then Gen X becomes a little less religious. Millennials are actually kind of where it takes a huge drop. Was with the at least it was with the millennial generation, and then Gen Z did start off continuing that pattern, but for some reason it's beginning to reverse. All right, and then this is argued by some reports from Washington Examiner and other outlets. This is okay. I'm gonna admit this is an AI synopsis that I used. I asked it a few questions and I copy pasted a few things. Uh, Cited that Gen Z Christians rose from around 45% in 2023 to roughly 51% in the mid 2020s. So that's 2025. Though these figures vary widely by source and methodology, and this is what I've heard was that we've tipped over the 50% mark and that we're getting to where uh, in the US maybe half of the generation is Christian, and that is kind of unprecedented. And I think a 6% increase in basically 2 years is like what could have happened. I think that that's pretty significant. All right. And so engagement along the committed is growing. So young Christians who do identify with family may be more active now than in previous years, attending services and making personal commitments more often. So that is one argument, one way to interpret is okay, maybe we're not getting more Christians, but maybe Christians are becoming even more religious and we're getting less casual Christians, which was always an observation. And then there are some demographics. Gen Z men have had the biggest transition uh, towards towards becoming Christian. And then Bible sales and spiritual interest indicators are rising. And so Bible purchases are spiking quite a bit. And I have that here as well. So in 2024, there were, and this is just in general, this isn't even Gen Z, but many of them are Gen Z. 13.7 million Bibles were sold when was in 2024, and then 2023 was 14.2, but this is a big spike up both of these years from the 9.7 million sold in 2019, and many of these buyers are Gen Z. So okay, we're seeing this. I've also seen for the first time ever that this is the first generation in the US where there are more Catholics than Protestants. Like Catholicism has just ticked over and it's becoming it's the most popular denomination. It's if you consider Catholicism a denomination, then it's always been the most popular. But have there been more Catholics and Protestants? So that's another thing. And again, I'm not trying to. The only reason I point that out is Catholicism is like it's a return to tradition. And I think that is ultimately the source of what is going on here. We live in a very unprecedented time. I think my generation in particular is we lived our lives, we especially uh like us born in the late 90s lived a very short amount of time with most of us without access to the internet and to social media. I've had internet since I was probably 5 or 6, and I've had social media since I was, a teenager. And I'm an older Gen Z. There's a lot of people in my generation who are younger, and I was late to get into social media. Like all my friends, all my siblings had social media before I had Snapchat, Instagram, any of that stuff. I don't think I got it till I was 18 because I was just being weird, and I just never I never liked it. But I would say the average person in my generation has spent the majority of their lives on social media, on the internet, just an increase of just stimulus, and you're constantly being shown like all these horrible things that are happening in the world. There's cyberbullying. There's all the psychological effects of being locked into a virtual world more often, having all that screen time, and it's had its effects on our generation. I mean, Gen Z is, as everyone has heard, depression, anxiety, mental health issues have just skyrocketed with my generation, and a lot of it is to do with just this this screaming process, advancing in technology, advancing in communication, advancements in just everything. And there's just so much more noise that we've grown up with versus like my parents, and that is had its effect. And I think it's come to a tipping point, as many of you could imagine. It's come to this tipping point where I really feel, and I can feel it with my peers and with my friends and family, is just there's this rejection of, okay, enough is enough, because the culture, and obviously this is all from an American perspective, the culture has been pushing religion away for years. And it's, our movies, our music, our books, all of our media, and just what's promoted, you know, the lives and actions that are promoted to us on social media are not traditional lives. They're not lives that would, generally have been taught in the church, and, in any church really. And it's just very non-traditional. And the secular society has been telling us that religion is antiquated, religion is not is a thing of the past, and they've been trying to debunk religion and saying that it's silly, it's fairy tales. And I know a lot of people who still struggle with this, who still struggle with, I want something concrete to believe in, but I've been kind of led to believe through my education, through my own opinions, the world has led me to believe that all religions are fairy tales, and that we live in a simply materialistic society, a materialistic world, excuse me. And there might not be no rhyme or reason. There's no consciousness. There's no thought behind it. We are just the offspring of random chaotic events that have happened in space and time. And that is where I think a lot of the depression and anxiety aspect comes from, is at your core. Even if you're happy to be a participant, let's just say, for example, that there is no God, there is no creator, there is no consciousness, there's not really a rhyme or reason to why we are here. You can tell yourself that you have, you can, for lack of a better word or term, invent reasons to keep going, and invent reasons to keep progressing, and to be a good person, and to, get married, have a family, show up to work, and just be a participant in society. But eventually that's all going to ring hollow when you pull the layers away, and in your heart of hearts you believe, what is the point? Or you ask yourself, why am I here? What is ultimately, if life is just this quick little blip of existence, and nothing happened before and nothing's going to happen after, why participate? Why participate in it? And it's a very bleak, dark look at the state of affairs that we're in. And I don't promote religion as a form of lying to yourself. Obviously, I believe that the teachings of my church are true. I believe in God. I believe that Jesus came here and that he was the Son of God, the physical presence of God, the physical incarnation. I believe that when I take communion on Sunday, that is Jesus, as humbling himself to be consumed and to nurture us. I believe in all of it. I believe in the Bible as a historical text, and that's becoming less and less radical. That thought process that I'm having, and as much as science and academia, and obviously not all of academia is trying to push towards debunking religion, but I think a lot of my professors in college were, played around the edges of it, of trying to debunk religion. And I didn't have like a theology degree or a history degree or a science degree. I have a degree in information technology. It should be unrelated to all that, but it always comes back to it. So why, and I've seen it. I've seen it when I was in high school, when I was in college. Now that I'm in my young, the early parts of my career, I've seen. I feel like I've seen the world change a lot. AI didn't used to exist. These different these different fears didn't used to exist. A lot of people think that we're more divided than we've ever been, and you can kind of argue that, but the point I'm getting at is there is so much stimulus. There is so much to take in, and me being someone in my late 20s who's born in the late 90s, who was born in 99 literally. um, I've really never known a time where I haven't had complete ubiquitous access to stimulus and information, and that's the internet. Again, like I've had the internet since my earliest memories, just about. I very very I really don't remember a time, or I barely remember a time where I didn't have internet. Like I said, I think we got internet when I was like 6, I want to say. So, and then of course, I didn't have a phone until I was like, 13, 14 or whatever it was. I didn't have social media until later than that, but I was online gaming. I was doing all these things. I was watching movies, watching TV shows, and I, I've always had access to it. I didn't grow up in my parents talk about growing up in the 80s when it was just a little more analog, uh, and it's easy for me to get to that point because I look at my own faith journey. Yes, I'm a cradle Catholic. I was born. My parents are both Catholic. I was baptized, had my first communion, and then confirmed. And I've I've had my doubts throughout the years, for sure. I've had my considerations, but I've never actually left the church. I didn't leave and come back. I've always been a part of it, but my faith has definitely been more on fire recently and in different periods of my life. And then there are some points in my life where I was really questioning things. There are moments in my life where I'm like, is the Catholic Church the church I want to follow? And I don't want to turn this into like a Christian denominational argument, but I was considering leaving the Catholic Church. I was considering, hey, is any of this Christian thing valid? Am I an atheist? Am I an agnostic? I think everyone has those thoughts when they're growing up, and especially when I grew up in a community that was basically every family was Christian, a very small town, and then you go off to college and you get exposed to a much larger group of people who don't all come from the same place, and you start talking to people and they start trying to poke hole, successfully poking holes, at least at the time, into what I believed, and it's just like, oh, maybe, yeah, maybe there isn't something to it. But and the argument there, as that many people would say, and many people would probably say to me, is, well, if Catholicism is all you know, and that's what your family is, and why you're going to be very, the thing is, everyone always says, well, you're going to stay Catholic because you're afraid of being, excommunicated by your family. And that was just never a fear of mine. I have family that does not attend church anymore. And we're all fine. We're all, no one's any less or more part of the family. That was just never a worry with me. I have very understanding parents and aunts and uncles and siblings who we've accepted everyone, and we're not, it's not my place to judge. Obviously, I pray for all the people in my life who, to find clarity and to find truth. And I'm trying to find it myself. Is where I stand. It's not my job to get in anyone's face and tell them what they think is right or wrong. It is my job to pray and trust. And you can disagree with me all you want. I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with that, but it's my job to pray and to trust and to live a life that is inviting, and to live a life that encourages people to think, well, what's he got going on? And to me, that's the best form of evangelization. And then I have platforms like this where I invite you to come and listen. I'm not going to force anyone to listen to me talk, of course, but that is ultimately the form of evangelization that's always worked best and seemed effective to me. But anyways, that's what we're talking about today. Gen Z, and I'm going to lump millennials in this as well, because I still consider millennials like a young generation. We've tried the secular atheist agnostic thing. We've tried it, and I just don't think it worked. I think you can clearly see that in just the rise of self harm, the rise of suicide, the rise of depression, anxiety, all these things. It's a lost feeling. A lot of people feel lost. The rise of, another encouraging thing is Gen Z is drinks a surprising little amount of alcohol. That is a big thing, and something that I think is really indicative of just kind of the thought process is we've tried chasing the material. We've tried that as a society, and finally myself and my peers and everyone, we're just like, you know what, that's empty. We ultimately have come up empty, and we've seen how this has affected other people. We don't want that outcome. We don't want that outcome anymore. And it's really encouraging because I think it's just overall a healthier, happier uh, uh, world outlook that I'm seeing. So, but this gets me to mainly one of the main reasons why I started this podcast is very few people in my generation. I shouldn't say very few, but it is now you're in the minority of Gen Z if you consider yourself an atheist. And a lot of people have found God. A lot of people have been Christian or maybe gone to a different religion, but a lot of people are saying they're spiritual. And I think that's the one thing that I've wanted to talk about on this channel or this podcast, this platform, all from like the very first episode when I was talking about this, is we're the idea of a secular atheist culture is being rejected. But Christianity has not completely replaced it. Organized religion has not completely replaced it. And this goes into my last episode of why your religion needs to be organized. Is a lot of people, I see it more often. I see it so often. So many of my friends say, I'm spiritual, I'm agnostic, I'm not here to subscribe to anything. They kind of just go about their day. And a lot of them have read the Bible. But a lot of people aren't. A lot of people are just are just saying, you know what, I'm just going to live a life where I'm just spiritual. And everyone defines that differently. Everyone defines being spiritual differently, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's good that we have hope that there is something out there. Uh, I just question if you're not going to define what that something is. Like that would feel crazy to me, as if I'm just gonna just sort of loosely have this sort of ethereal idea of what is actually going on, and ultimately it all circles back to if you don't place your faith in a religion. I'm not saying you have to. I'm not making a call to action like you must convert today. But what I do encourage is to pull at the thread of doubt, pull at the thread of curiosity, and to look into these things. I would implore people, and I'm not going to get into all the reasons why today, but I am going to continue to cover the evidence and the reason why I feel like my faith is getting stronger in very real things, in a real God, in a real heaven, in a real spiritual aspect of life that is, to me, Christianity. But if no one's here, if no one's going to define that, if no one's going to, it ultimately comes back to a form of self-worship is what I'm trying to get at. And I continue to see it. We're obviously, this is the end of December 2026. It's been if you've been paying attention to the news, I'm not even going to touch politics with a 100-foot pole on this podcast, but there is division. We've seen it. There is a lot of division, and personally, I see from all sides, there's a lot of hypocrisy out there. A lot of hypocrisy. And at the root of it is there's self-worship. A little bit of self-worship in that I define the morals and actions for myself, and I'm going to expect others to abide to that. And you get into a really confusing area where a lot of people, or a lot of just what you see is kind of people practicing self-worship. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you don't have a higher power or a higher governing structure to set your morals, and so you set them for yourself. You let the secular culture set it for you, things like that. And it's not, to me, it's just not the path, honestly. Um, and that's always been my argument: is if you have nothing to worship, you worship yourself, and you worship your own thoughts. And I think we all know at this point that as humans, we're very imperfect. We're very flawed. In fact, as a Christian, that's kind of the core of what I believe is I am flawed. I am inherently scarred from original sin. There's inherently something, as much as I strive to be a good person every day, I fall short, just like every other person that I know and love that I would consider a good person falls short. We all do. None of us are safe from the hurdles of the human experience, right? None of us are safe. And so I, I don't know. I just think that having the humility and having and coming to the understanding that, okay, I need to put my faith into something a little bigger than myself. I need to go outside of myself. And if there's something that my church teaches that I don't agree with, or I'm just like, uh, that's good. That is ultimately a good thing. And I think it's ultimately good to, again, pull out the threads, wrestle with God, wrestle with it. And you're going to come to a point of clarity and understanding. I really believe that. I really believe that is, we were meant, I mean, our faith, I believe in the great mystery of my faith. It's a great mystery. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, it is if you understood everything, then it's not faith. Then it's just knowing. And we're not called to know. We're called to have faith, and we're called to believe. And so that is, I'm going to try to wrap a big bow on this episode. I feel like I've gone a lot of different directions, but it's it's just, I think that's ultimately what it is if you are having those thoughts, if you're listening to this right now and you are, and you're getting kind of swept up in this, because I'm seeing the transition right now. I'm seeing it before my own eyes. People, yes, as a group, the generation is starting to say, I don't know if this whole atheist thing is for me. But also not wanting to commit to anything. And I would imagine that that's a confusing place to be in. And I think a lot of things have been said about organized religion over the years. And it's okay. It's okay to not be certain. If you're feeling called to look into these things, to go to church, to open your Bible, it's just like, it's okay to question. It's okay to have doubt. I have doubts all the time. I really do. I don't think that makes you a bad Christian or a bad Catholic or a bad, person of faith. I think that makes you human, and I think it makes you active in your faith. And I have some close, very, very close family members who I've had this discussion with. There's this feeling of guilt that comes along with, I just don't know. I see so many people that just seem to wake up every day and exude this light and this fire for their faith, and they seem so sure of themselves and so confident. And I don't feel that way. And I have doubts. And I I I don't know where I'm at with my faith, and I'm like, that's good. I think that's a good thing because you're aware of it. And I will tell you this right now, those people who are seemingly on fire, they are great. They are. They're great examples in our communities, but they too, I guarantee you, they too have gone through the same thing. They've gone through the same thing, or they're going through the same thing. You know, we're all living, different experiences. And what someone puts out there might not necessarily be how they feel all the time. Certainly me. If you're listening to this, you might have certain thoughts about me. I would say I'm more confident now than ever, but that is a far cry from confident, right? And being fully confident and being all knowing. And I don't think we're meant to completely know. I think that there's a great mystery to my faith that is left to be discovered. And that's why we call the podcast Discoveries in Faith. So, all right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. I just had to hop on, had to ramble a little bit. I really wanted to talk about this transition that I'm not even going to say young people. I'm going to say the world is moving towards something, right? The world is looking for something to believe in. And isn't that just, to me, that is an inherent truth, is that we all feel like we need that thing. We need that higher power, that's something to believe in. And I know this much. The Catholic Church is a very welcoming place for all the downtrodden, all the people that are looking for something to believe in, a community to be a part of. We're here for you. We are here. So yeah, I hope it's a message of hope that you guys are getting from this episode. And yeah, I think that's all I have. The book, I'm going to talk about the book that I'm reading this month. The book, I am done with the YouTube video, because there's a YouTube channel for this page now. Please go subscribe. I would highly appreciate that. Maybe you're listening to this podcast on YouTube right now. But we finished reading Bible Basics for Catholics, the book, and I'm going to create a video that should be launching February 1st, which is probably when this podcast is going to come out, on my review of that book, and then the next book that we're going to read for the little Discoveries in Faith book club, the Discoveries Book Club. So I'm just going to plug that. Please go look at the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is just called Discoveries in Faith Pod, and I want to grow that bad boy, and I want to be available on as many platforms as possible. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. 2026. Wow, we are a month through already. We're 1/12 of the way through 2026. That is, time flies, man. It's crazy. But I have big hopes and dreams and optimism for the podcast this year, and I hope you guys do too. All right. Until next time, have a blessed day. Go to church, open your Bible, carve out some time for God. I guess that's the only thing I want to remind people of, because I need to do it as well. All right. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of your week. And until next time, this is Jacob signing out of the Discoveries in Faith podcast.